20 years after unification, the world knew a strict order. Society would be unrecognizable by 21st century eyes, for it was draconian, worshipped efficiency over humanity, but was better than the chaos and starvation that mankind had known for a century. United Earth had expertly made a fetish of its own brutality and did not hide its sins. It unashamedly showed the piles of bodies it had created and said, "It is up to us to make this never a necessity again." The primary zones with their vast metropolitan hives continued to grow despite population controls. Each primary zone was a contributor to the United Earth Authority and had representatives on the Central Council, the authority's highest governing body. And each zone was expected to abide by all United Earth regulations and initiatives. The authority was split into 3 directorates, one for each of its 3 principles. The Unity Directorate concerned itself with the homogeneity of governance and consolidating United Earth's conquests. It controlled the main military force of the authority, the Unification Forces, as well as several specialized counter-revolutionary units. While posing no real threat, many areas within the administered outer zones were still not pacified, and the authority still faced long, drawn-out struggles there. Within the primary zones and the pacified outer areas, Unity also concerned itself with law and order, the application of its harsh form of justice. The Primacy Directorate busied itself with the endless task of separating those individuals who were sufficiently prime from those who were still in the grips of secondary systems of thought, or worse yet, maintained ideals that United Earth had derisively dismissed as utopian. Democracy, libertarianism, socialism, a whole span of ideologies ranging from the postmodern to the religious, which the authorities said were proven not only unrealistic, but naive and dangerous by the last century of chaos. The Primacy Directorate maintained a massive bureaucracy that regulated employment and access by the mimetic fitness of each individual. The powerhouse behind primacy was the feared Office of Games and Numbers, the most effective secret police and internal intelligence organization humanity had ever created. Assisted by complex mathematical models of human behavior and the ability to construct and predict individual thought through observation, Games and Numbers presided over a data mining and surveillance apparatus of incredible power. They could predict with unnerving accuracy the probability of the actions of entire populations, or they could use their vast apparatus to drill down and produce computer simulacra of individuals to load into their virtual games to predict their behavior. They played out theoretical scenarios, ran simulations, analyzed outcomes based on their advanced mimetic models, while also charting long games of manipulation and mimetic engineering to ensure United Earth stability. Under the Office of Games and Numbers guidance, earlier cruder systems of classifying and analyzing the fitness of each citizen had been replaced by a global mimetic fitness index. This rating defined each person's life, where they could work, where they could live, their access to medical care, food, and other rationed goods. A single look, a stray word, the fact you listened for 1 minute to an idea and reacted ever so slightly to it, and the electronic eyes and vast algorithms of Games and Numbers would quietly recalculate your fitness. The beauty of the system was that it did not require purges, political imprisonment, or brainwashing to maintain its hold on the citizenry. Instead, under its Neo-Confucian state of testing, analysis, and privileges, any individual who failed to prove themselves was condemned to a life of ever-increasing poverty and desperation. And with its uncanny ability to predict and manipulate the actions of groups, potential rebellions often disintegrated with only the slightest action from the Primacy Directorate, all guided by Games and Numbers' cognitive prediction and models of human behavior. Games and Numbers became a name whispered in fear and muttered in anger, the seemingly undefeatable enemy of all who desired change. The third and final directorate, Continuity, was charged with ensuring the continuation of the human species. It maintained forces dedicated to disease control, often by violent and extreme means, as well as overseeing the implementation of radical climate stabilization programs. Plastic and petroleum-eating bacteria, massive carbon dioxide reclamation facilities, and sky-darkening dimming programs helped cool the Earth, as well as radiation and toxic cleanup efforts, often by disposable prisoners. There were sparse attempts by holdouts and environmentalist factions to resist continuity programs. The work camps only grew. But under the Continuity Directorate, humanity began to look off-world again, and connections with Mars were reestablished. Continuity knew full well that the present situation on Earth was tenuous at best, and began investing in programs to extend the reach of the species, and thus its potential to survive catastrophe. Bolstered by new technology and the resources United Earth provided, the old colonies in high orbit in the outer solar system were re-established, and new experimental mining operations in the asteroid belt were created, as well as undersea and floating habitats for the exploration of deep water resources. These experiments to colonize extreme environments were known as edge colonies. Together, the directorates formed the backbone of United Earth. Stable and confident in its dominance, United Earth began to assess and allow new ideologies and thoughts to emerge. While utopian ideals were scorned, the Primacy Directorate allowed and assessed new movements through humanity, such as neo-primitivism, transhumanism, and new versions of old religions, began to show themselves in the hives of primary zones. The most influential was the followers of the so-called technical doctrine. Known as techs, they advocated organizing society according to the principles of thermodynamics, internally consistent energy economies, and zero-waste designs operating by strict guidelines run by talented engineers, optimized for individual situations, rather than adopting a universal guideline and mandate from the directorates. The technical doctrine quickly took root in edge colonies, where the concept of independent yet efficient stable systems had a natural appeal. Already dealing with issues of distance communication with the edge colonies, United Earth began to authorize semi-autonomous enclaves, experimental communities engaging in radical new concepts for human survival, adopting technical and other strategies in limited areas. Edge colonies began operating almost completely on new orders of thinking. There was a flowering of scientific thought and development as the enclaves created a new emphasis on radical discovery instead of harsh brutality as the key to human survival. New technologies flourished. Radically advanced AI, cybernetics and biotechnological marvels, the development of the first artificial bioroids, cryogenic stasis, and so on. At first, the hard-line faction of Unity leadership was wary to attack a prime society for mere experimentation, but there was almost an immediate tension between the tech agitators and conservative Unity leaders. Transhumanists and other radical elements started having a stronger voice in the enclaves. Especially in the outer solar system, edge colonies operated with very little supervision, and rumors abounded. Some operations around Saturn and the asteroid belt dropped communications completely and unexpectedly for weeks at a time. As rumors and information came out about activity inside the enclaves, the situation came to a head. There were reports of radical biotech experiments that ignored Unity guidelines, raising fears of pandemics and blights of the past era. Utopians and other secondary citizens began to hold higher and higher positions in the enclave leadership, and some edge colonies were reported to be completely infiltrated by utopians or radicals using the permissiveness of the model as a shield. Some enclaves were even experimenting with semi-capitalist chartered corporations and the profit motive, despite global capitalism's hated acidic role in the collapse. The Central Council sided with reactionary elements within the directorates to put a stop to this clear danger. Moving quickly on easily reached enclaves, a political crisis quickly erupted. Mass protests and leadership breakdowns came about, including trusted Unity officials siding against the Council's actions. This was unprecedented in the Unity era, with the overwhelming force of United Earth's might and the sinister influence and predictions of games and numbers to keep the peace. The rash move against the enclave sparked the first major political crisis since the rise of the Authority. Several enclaves unilaterally broke off relations with United Earth. Several primary zones seemed to falter under the pressure of their populace. A radical group seized power in several regions of the Martian colony and declared independence. Games and numbers models predicted outcomes ranging from violent conflict with primary zones to the collapse of the Authority itself. Soon, the Central Council was sending envoys to preside in talks between regional officials, the directorate leadership, and the most influential enclave leaders. In the end, the majority of the enclaves came back into the fold. They were reintegrated into Authority control, but the enclave schism had lasting effects on United Earth. The enclaves fought for concessions and changes. Unity eased away from its outright impoverishment or eradication of skilled individuals, instead keeping them under close observation and strictly relegating them to advisory positions of no disruptive power. Skill and ability were now gauged in how strictly the Mimetic Fitness Index and its limits are applied. The enclave corporations unified under a single entity, the Triad Corporation, owned equally by primary zones in the Central Council, and their operations restricted to off-world and the Singapore Special Zone. Exceptions began to be made, but in return, the enclaves now had to operate under stricter supervision and suppress certain projects or tendencies. Hardliner suspicions were correct about some of the enclaves being nests of revolution and dissent. The utopians and outsiders who had found refuge in the enclaves and edge colonies were unable to give up the taste of freedom they had found. The Office of Games and Numbers began ruthlessly identifying, imprisoning, and marginalizing the utopian interlopers, while tech loyalists were allowed to re-enter the fold. The enclaves that complied with the authority were subjected to a methodical purge of their leadership. For the minority of the edge colonies, no concessions were acceptable. They were declared renegade, and the United Earth solution was simple: starve them out. Vital shipments of equipment and non-renewables soon ceased. The stations could operate for months, if not years, autonomously, but soon their options would run out. Mars overthrew its revolutionary government on its own and rejoined the fold. Martians had a well-earned reputation for practicality. Most of the asteroid settlements soon followed. But when transmissions and observable activity in the renegade outer solar system bases ceased, United Earth dispatched loyalist ships to contact and, if necessary, reclaim these colonies by force. But when they arrived, the bases were abandoned. Most of the scientific and technical equipment had been stripped, though enough research was left behind to reveal a feverish program of experimentation and prototyping of an entirely new technology. A hitherto hypothetical faster-than-light engine known as the Continuum Wave Drive. United Earth scoured the solar system for signs of the missing dissidents. The eventual conclusion was that the dissident colonists had fled elsewhere, or had died trying. With the recapture and repopulation of the outer solar system, the crisis known as the Schism was finally at an end. United Earth once again stood triumphant, but it was forever changed. The iron grip had loosened ever so slightly, and United Earth, armed with the inventions of its wayward children, turned its eyes toward the stars.